Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper, and we are going to start with breaking news in our world lead. President Biden, you just saw him there finishing addressing U.S. troops, service members stationed in the United Kingdom, as President Biden kicks off his first international trip, a high-stakes one that will culminate with one of the biggest meetings of his career, face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Biden begins with 4 days at the summit of fellow wealthy democracies, what's called the G7. Then the president heads to Brussels for two separate events, one with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, a collective defense alliance of 30 North American and European countries, and then a summit with leaders of the European Union. All of this is an effort to unite the United States and its closest allies in Biden's mission to stem Russia's nefarious ways before meeting with Putin. That will be in Geneva, Switzerland. The timing here could not be more urgent. President Biden says he plans to bring up the slew of cyber hacks perpetrated, intelligence officials say, by bad actors in Russia against American companies with Putin. Biden will bring that up with Putin. As Biden's energy secretary has warned, these hackers right now have the ability to shut down the U.S. power grid if they so desire. Let's get straight to CNN senior White House correspondent Phil Mattingly. He's in Falmouth, England. Phil, the White House just previewed Biden's conversation with Putin. What should we expect?
You know, I think the White House has been very clear that this is expected to be a direct conversation. This is expected to be a moment where the president lays out very clearly what the U.S. priorities are, but perhaps more importantly, what potential repercussions may come. Jake, you mentioned, obviously, the ransomware attacks that have occurred from criminal syndicates inside Russia, but also the state-sponsored attack, the SolarWinds attack that has infiltrated multiple different government agencies. The U.S. has already imposed sanctions related to that, but the president is expected to lay out further costs that the U.S. would impose directly to President Putin. And this is all part of a plan that the U.S. officials have laid out very clearly heading into this meeting, that the president, even though some of his advisors were wary of sitting down directly with President Putin, believes this is something that has to happen, that face-to-face matters, particularly with somebody who runs his country and runs his own foreign policy the way Vladimir Putin does. A very complex relationship, a very complex leader, one that President Biden, who met with President Putin 10 years ago as vice president, believes he can best manage face-to-face. But Jake, they've made very clear the president will be direct. The president is not going to hem and haw or try and tinker around the edges. He wants President Putin to know exactly where he stands, where the U.S. stands, and what will occur if President Putin continues some of the actions that he's gone through over the course of the last, not just several months, but several years. And Jake, one final thing that I think is important in talking to the president's national security advisors, and you laid it out in your lead-in, this meeting isn't happening in isolation. This meeting was very carefully calibrated to happen after these meetings with long-held U.S. alliances, with kind of the key stakeholders, Western countries that were formed in groups, and particularly in the case of NATO, to push back against Russia. The president wants to show a united front, show a reinvigorated Western front as he heads into that meeting, a show of strength that U.S. officials believe will help him as he sits down with a leader that very often is unpredictable, Jake.
All right, Phil Mattingly in England covering the president's trip for us. Thank you so much. And let's pick up with our panel here where Phil just left off, getting everybody on the same page. First at the G7 with 6 other countries, then with NATO with 29 other countries, then with the European Union. How important is that for Biden to get everybody on the same page so he can then meet with Putin?
Hugely important. And it was really notable in that speech you just gave, Jake, that he laid down some of the markers and gave a warning. It was not just the substance of what he said, but the timing of what he says. Warned that the U.S. will respond if in any way the Russians have aggression against the U.S. or any kind of democracy, and that there will be consequences for that. And he also talked really emphatically about the importance of alliances. And this is maybe boilerplate language for a U.S. president, but not up against what we saw for the past 4 years. And he was trying to really clearly make a break from that ahead of these meetings.
And we can't overemphasize the threat here in a way, because, I mean, you had the FBI director last week compare the cyber threat to 9/11. The energy secretary told me on Sunday that these bad actors in Russia, these hackers, have the power to shut down the U.S. power grid right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only a clear threat, but it almost seems as if it's coming out of nowhere. I think if people were just sort of waking up today, they might say, wow, how did we get to this point? And it's because for years, there's not been as much attention to what the nature of that threat was. And in order to combat that, I think the Biden administration recognizes that they need to have a pretty hard line on Putin, but they also need their allies together. I mean, for the last 4 years, as Dana just said, the series of events here for a trip like this would be, criticize your allies first, insist on more money, and then pivot to, our shared adversaries. And that is what the Biden administration.
Necessarily one of them.
And Russia was not necessarily one of them. So it's a complete change of tactic because the threat is so diffuse now. Cyber threats are not as easy, I think, for some people to conceptualize as other threats, and it requires a shared and a joint effort to combat it.
And Josh Rogan, the current U.S. ambassador to Russia, appointed by Trump, a holdover in the job right now, he privately warned lawmakers of his concerns that the Biden administration risks making the same mistake of previous administrations if they don't go into this meeting with clear eyes about the threat. Biden has talked tough about Putin in the past. What do you think?
The U.S.-Russia relationship is complex. We have good aspects and bad aspects. It's tough to manage. The problem with the Trump administration is that it was a mess, that Trump was saying one thing and the bureaucracy was saying another thing. So now they have a chance to get on the same page. So that means being tough, but also having a path towards negotiation on the things they care about. Iran, climate change, Afghanistan, you name it, arms control. So that's complex. That's the stuff of diplomacy that we haven't been doing. So just identifying the problem is good. Democracies versus autocracies. Everybody can understand that. That's all well and good. But now, can we walk and chew gum? Can we be tough with Putin and also advance our interests where they overlap? That's what's going on behind the scenes. They don't know. The Biden people don't know if Putin is willing to go back to that kind of frenemies relationship where we're tough in public, but in private we work on stuff. And the Russians don't know if the Biden team is willing to do that either. So that's the test. That's what we'll know coming out of this. Is it just going to be tough, or are we going to have a complex relationship with an important country that we need to deal with on the world stage in order to protect ourselves?
There are things, Dana, that President Biden and his administration have done that Russia hawks have been disappointed by. Lifting the sanctions related to Nord Stream, not informing the Ukrainian president, Zelensky, that he was going to do that. And a number of other things. Now, it's early yet. We don't know what he's going to do, but I know plenty of Russia hawks who had hopes for Biden that are already disappointed, who think that he is giving Russia rewards before there has been any reason to reward them.
That's right, especially given the rhetoric that we heard from candidate Joe Biden, because Russia was such a political hot potato because Donald Trump and everything that we know that happened with Russia, that Joe Biden was so aggressive about saying how tough he would be on Russia, and that because of his 36 years in the Senate and his experience 8 years as vice president, they understood Russia and that they would really be punished, that he set up the Biden administration to be more hawkish, as you said. And then he got in there and he's a little bit more realpolitik in terms of his approach, because he does understand the complexities that you just laid out.
Different than governing.
Yeah.
Okay, and he has a responsibility, and they have an agenda, and they need Putin to work with it. Is that possible? Can they come to an agreement on Syria? Well, that would be good for Syria, good for Russia and the United States, but the relationship might be too broken to fix. So I think they should do both. We should walk and chew gum. We should work with them and be tough with them, stand it up to them, and then try to negotiate with them. That's what we haven't had. We haven't had competence in our diplomacy, and can they bring back that competence? I think it remains to be seen.
I think a lot of this is going to depend on Putin, though. I mean, when Biden says he wants a stable and predictable relationship, the question is, can you have a stable and predictable relationship with Vladimir Putin, who literally tries to troll Joe Biden at every turn, saying things publicly that he knows are as far as the January 6th insurrection, for example, downplaying that, but then on top
also
of that,
acting as if those are the persecuted people being persecuted for the political beliefs.
Navalny.
Right. And that's a really good point, because I think that what it seems that Putin is doing right now is really pushing the envelope on these cyber attacks, on how he's dealing with dissidents internally, and it's challenging the premise that this can be a stable relationship, let alone one that is predictable. The Biden administration may want that, But Putin sees an opening here it seems, to act out. And the question is, can they get him back to the table in a reasonable way? And maybe the cat is out of the bag. I mean, he's had 4 years of being able to really do kind of what he wants on the world stage. It's a little hard to put that genie back in the bottle.
If Putin does not listen to President Biden and the next hacking attack in the U.S. is even worse than SolarWinds or JBS or Colonial Pipeline, do you think that it will seem that President Biden has failed?
Well, it's not over. He will be failing, but he's got 4 years. There are a number of measures they can take, both positive and negative, carrots and sticks, sanctions and also helping U.S. companies protect themselves. I mean, we have to clean up our own shop before we point fingers elsewhere. And there's always going to be criminals. Putin's always going to be a bad guy. He's always going to be a killer. So we have to shore up our own systems to make sure that they're not ripe for this kind of stealing. But yes, I think Abby is exactly right. If Putin doesn't want to play ball, then fine. We're going to have 4 years of increasing tensions. And if that's the game he wants to play, then that's the game we can play. And we have the high ground. We are the United States of America. But what Biden is trying to do is convince the rest of the world that this new return to normalcy and diplomacy is not just a temporary thing, that America is back. But what the Europeans are saying is, is America back? Because Biden can't make any promises that go beyond January 2025.
And Dana, we've talked about this. Joe Biden's public persona, aided, in fact, by Donald Trump and Donald Trump's campaign, is this befuddled old man who doesn't even know where he's going. The truth of the matter is, he is a tough guy, and I don't necessarily mean that even as a compliment. I mean, he is a brass knuckles politico, and this is not the perception of him out there. But we'll see if he brings that to bear with Putin. And he has exhibited that toughness and brashness, frankly, in meetings when he was vice president. He talks about it, about how he has stormed out of meetings. That is not exactly the kind of characteristic that one would think of when they think of, frankly, the Uncle Joe that he tries to put forward on the domestic stage. But that is him. And I think the point that all of you have made is really important, that we have to continue to juxtapose where we are now versus where we were for 4 years, where Vladimir Putin felt in a lot of ways very justifiably that he could play the president of the United States like a fiddle. He can't do that now for one reason and one reason only, and perhaps there are more, but at least the baseline is because Biden has the experience. Biden has the understanding of geopolitics that his predecessor didn't have. We'll see if he has the mettle, though.
It's an open
to be determined. Dana Bash, Abby Phillip, Josh Rogan, good to see you again in person. It's been a long time. President Biden hit with a left hook for trying to reach out to the right. Why some progressives are fed up after infrastructure talks crumble. And the vice president shaking off a few hits she took for not visiting the border on her trip south. CNN did go to the border, and what we found there in terms of pain and heartache, well, it's shocking. Stay with us.
Hiring new employees takes a lot of patience. Just finding the right candidates is time-consuming, and quickly filling open positions is an important factor in keeping your business moving. Indeed is the only job site that can move as fast as you do. Indeed.com is the hiring site that helps you find quality candidates with Indeed Instant Match. Indeed searches through the millions of resumes in their database to help show you great candidates instantly. Unlike some hiring sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility, delivering a quality shortlist faster. With Indeed, there are no long-term contracts. You can pause your account at any time, and you only pay for what you need. And Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. Want your quality shortlist fast? You need Indeed. Right now, get a free $75 credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Tapper. That's Indeed.com/Tapper. Offer valid through March 31st. Terms and conditions apply.
With over 30 years in business and a satisfaction guarantee, you can trust Psychic Source. Receive private readings over the phone or chat. Call 800-551-3400 for prices as low as 83 cents per minute. Use promo code PHONE to save.
In our politics lead, progressives are fed up after President Biden scrapped one bipartisan infrastructure negotiation to move on to another bipartisan infrastructure negotiation. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who thinks that Democrats need to ultimately go it alone, She called the move to now defer to this 10-member group of Senate Republicans and Democrats, quote, foolish. And the Congresswoman is not alone.